The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on an initiative called Engineering with Nature. It all started in 2010. And this is the EWN podcast. EWN is developing and implementing nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It's bringing together a growing international community of scientists, engineers, and researchers from all kinds of disciplines that are committed to harnessing the power of nature to solve problems. The EWN podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
In Season 4, Episode 10, we talked about what could happen when a world-renowned landscape architect from Thailand comes to the United States as designer in residence to work with an award-winning architect whose passion is what he calls watershed architecture. Today, we're thrilled to have Kotch and Derek back to tell us what they've been working on since we talked a year ago. Welcome to Season 6, Episode 8. Jeff King, lead of the Engineering with Nature program, and I are very happy to have Kotch Vorakholm, or Kotch as she's known, who's a Thai architect and CEO of her firm called Land Process, and Derek Hefferlin, who's chair of the Landscape Architecture and Urban Design programs at Washington University in St. Louis, back on our show. Hey, welcome back, Kotch.
Hello. สวัสดีค่ะ
Derek, it's been quite a year for you. We look forward to hearing all about it.
It's great to be back. Thank you very much.
So Derek and his team at the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts spent the last year hosting Kotch in her role as designer in residence, which was sponsored by the Pulitzer Arts Foundation. And from what I can gather, I think they had a meeting of the minds. Jeff, we've been looking forward to hearing what Kotch and Derek have been up to.
Oh, yes, we have. Welcome back, Kotch and Derek. I can't wait to hear from you and what you've been doing, and perhaps more importantly, share with our audience what you've learned from this past year.
Great. Derek, maybe you could start by talking about your opportunity to host Kotch and collaborate with her over the past year.
Yes. Well, thank you, Sarah. The Pulitzer Arts Foundation, which is here in St. Louis and has been here since the early 2000s, has done a collaboration over a number of years with our Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts here at Washington University in St. Louis. And every couple of years, they bring in what's called a designer in residence. And that can be an artist, it could be an architect, a landscape architect, or design more broadly. So I guess a couple of years ago, we all started to talk with our dean, Carmen Colangelo here, and Kara from the Pulitzer, the director, and Emily Pulitzer and others, and Kristen Fleischman Brewer, who is the deputy director of community engagement for the Pulitzer Arts Foundation, about who the next amazing person could be. And we started talking about shared interests and themes of the built environment and environment more in general and climate change. And so Kotch's name, for several reasons, came up. And one thing led to another, and we invited Kotch to come to St. Louis. Part of the reasoning was me meeting her before and our shared interest on issues of climate change and climate adaptive designs. And then what could it mean to bring someone from an international perspective to St. Louis in the St. Louis region to start to study and work with us on similar or maybe different challenges that deal with climate change, with floods, with droughts, and communities' relationships to water in St. Louis.
Well, I think you picked a really amazing person to join you. Kotch, what did you hope to achieve in your residency?
Well, I guess it's like a journey, Sarah. And, like when you travel into some place or some experience, you're expecting something. But when you go through it, you're actually coming up with the different things that you're not expecting. And I think my whole journey for this year with Sam Fox, with Pulitzer Art Foundation, with Derek's, with students, with mayors, with youth group, it's just really like transforming myself as a designer as well. So what I'm expecting is turned out to be unexpected. Yes. Is that considered as an answer?
Yes, it is. That's fantastic. So now you got me curious, Kotch. So maybe you could break it down for us a little bit and sort of offer in the beginning, how did you approach that residency, and more or less just start telling us the story. What happened once you arrived, and the process by which you sort of got up to speed?
Well, I think it's like I'm a practitioner, right? Like
Right.
the landscape, I get things built. I want construction drawings, and I want the budget to. So I just feel that I've been in that loop for like 10 plus years into my own practice.
Yeah.
And I think this is such a good pause, but it's not like pause as a stop, but it's just like pause to relearn what I have learned. And like as a practitioner, you want to conquer the world, you want to change the world. This is how I'm going to design, and as a designer as well. But at the end, you just have to let the world change you as well. Like like learning from the community, listening to the new ecology systems, be in the river, be in Mississippi. I have been in Chao Phraya, but I've been in Mississippi, which is like different scales. Oh my gosh, the structure, the dam is like huge. I feel like I'm an ant, like so small. Like just the perception of being in the river is just changes me as a person. Like, oh my gosh, what are we dealing with? And of course,
sure,
just knowing one river and knowing another river, and it's questioning you for what about others rivers around the world that's confronting the same issues. It's really, it's not a very intellectual kind of experience. I think it's very spontaneous kind of like learning from my experience.
We sure want to hear more about that journey and more about what you learned. But to set the stage, I want to talk a little bit with Derek about his book. Derek, your book, Way Beyond Bigness, The Need for Watershed Architecture, finally came out this summer. I know it was a labor of love, and I have to say it is an absolutely magnificent book. It's really, really an achievement, and I think it's quite groundbreaking. So tell us a little bit about the book, because it really ties your journey and Kotch's together.
Well, thank you for those kind words. Yes, it's been a labor of love indeed. Maybe a 15-year project, but probably even started before that. The subtitle, where it says Watershed Architecture, is back to Kotch kind of saying as practitioners wanting to maybe conquer the world. It's an idea of engaging that, that what we've kind of tried to do for centuries now. But it asks us as designers, as me specifically as an architect, and I is a practitioner as well. It asks us to take a step back and look at watersheds, both in terms of their traditional definition, as we know, of rivers and water going down to the sea, but also the notion of a watershed can also be a tipping point in time. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, why did I come to this term, and why did I come to this book? I lived in New Orleans for a number of years, left a couple of years before Hurricane Katrina hit. But once that hit, and of course, subsequent climate-related disasters in very frequent ways that have happened since then, made me start to think about what does it mean to just design buildings within this complicated, large-scale context. So it asks us as designers to look at these larger scale events and watersheds and what they mean for design decisions. So specifically, how can we engage water better within our design decisions? But then that begs the question of why should an architect, a landscape architect, be part of river basin scale transformation or decision making? And I think that's where it comes into where we are right now with the interest with the conversation with engineering with nature and trying to think of a much more holistic way to bring communities into that, what the next phase of this will be, hopefully in a much more ecological, community sensitive way.
Yeah. Well, Derek, this is fantastic to hear. And you're talking about very large systems, of course, and natural processes and this idea of collaboration and community engagement. And all of this sounds very much aligned with the principles of engineering with nature.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what's the possibility about all this. My work has been looking in this book, not just at the Mississippi watershed, or more technically river basin, as many people on this will understand, but also understanding it with a comparative context. And so that's something we're trained to do as designers and architects, to always not just look at your own site, but how it relates to other sites. And sometimes those sites don't necessarily add up or make sense together, but you learn from the differences. So I'm also been studying, there's personal reasons for this, but there's kind of real practical reasons, the Mekong and the Rhine river basins as well. So the Mississippi, the Mekong, and the Rhine, all very different in size and area just to begin with, but also very different in density. But they do, once you start to dig into them and visit them, as Kotch mentioned, and you go and see these dams that have been constructed over the last century or being constructed very rapidly in the next, couple of years in the Mekong, for instance, or maybe in the Rhine, thoughts about adapting them or even removing them. But they all have shared reasonings, primarily having to do with economy and navigation, but also in terms of flood protection and constructing these large-scale systems for development.
Right.
So that's really kind of what I'm interested in, and how we can make that more interconnected and for different scales of communities along those three basins.
I thought that the comparisons were really, really interesting. And I think it does help put a number of things in perspective, Derek. In the book, you are proposing what you call a simple adaptive framework for landscape architects and others. Can you walk us through that and tell us a little bit about what your thinking is behind that framework?
Sure. So the framework is 3 parts, and it's actually pretty simplistic. It's kind of what I think all of us a lot of times do. The first part is about analysis. The second part is about synthesis. And then the third part is about collaboration. But I also say in the analysis part, it's about appreciation. You need to learn to appreciate where you are, where you're going, and obviously not just document, but listen to what's happening in those places. The idea of synthesis sometimes, and a lot of times with designers, is about speculation, which is a loaded term. It can be a challenging term, but it's not always about reality. It's sometimes throwing out ideas that at first glance might sound hyperbolic or bombastic, but as you start to peel off the layers, you realize that maybe these things are really interesting and already happening. With the final part about catalyzing and collaboration is like, how do we find new techniques, new platforms, literally new platforms? Like I did a symposium, a conversation on a barge on the Mississippi River instead of a conference room, right? Getting people out literally into the water, as Kotch mentioned before, about getting on the river. But I also want to say the blessing and the curse of a book like this is that it's linear. You start on page 1, and then in this instance, you end, hopefully at some point, on page 596. There's a lot of dense stuff, crushed into there. I'll just leave it at that. Hopefully that's not the review of the book, but importantly, in the analysis part, which is the bulk of the book, I've created over a number of years with amazing research assistants and students and other collaborators here at WashU, what I call an atlas. So it's at multiple scales of drawings of comparing these three basins from the world, literally the biggest scale, and positioning these watersheds within the world all the way down to not a site scale, but more of a zone scale, like a lock and dam, for instance, which is still gigantic. But interspersed within that atlas, very importantly, are a series of guest contributions from people and experts that I've met over the years that I highly admire, some of which are landscape architects and photographers and architects, but they also include ecologists, engineers, climate scientists, agricultural scientists. So for instance, in the upper Mississippi portion, we have a great essay from Chuck Tiling, who's worked with the Corps of Engineers for a number of years and talks about his wetland restoration efforts in the upper pools. In the lower Mississippi, we have an essay from Alex Kolker, who's a climate scientist who really does this interesting essay that asks us to look for new potential dynamic points in the lower Mississippi where the river might change its course, not look at the obvious ones, but pay attention to clues elsewhere. In the Mekong, Duong Van Ni is a climate or an agricultural scientist who is helping local, let's say, rice farmers adapt their farms to more salt tolerant crops, and he's equipping them with tools to go measure that. And then finally, in the Rhine Basin, there's a great essay by Dale Morris and Robert de Koning, where they reflect on the Room for the River program, which is this great program that's now kind of wrapped up and moved into its new phase in the Netherlands. But what does it mean back maybe to the United States and the Engineering with Nature program when you look at places like that? So anyway, that's just a kind of a small snapshot, but very importantly, that there's experts that have contributed to this where I'm not the sole author.
Yeah.
Derek, I'm going to confess I have not read all the way to page 596, but I looked at all the pictures, and honestly, I read several of the expert pieces, and I thought they were really interesting. So
Great.
I would highly recommend the book to our listeners.
Derek, you touched on something too that I found just truly exciting, is that you didn't limit your conversations or your engagements to just one discipline. You really look to expand those conversations and have experts from different fields. So you mentioned landscape architects, but you also mentioned the scientists and the engineers. All of them have perspective and insight that is very meaningful and is needed to better understand systems and to find the right approach for integrating nature or restoring nature into these systems. So just wonderful to hear that you're thinking along those lines, and certainly excited to learn more about the book and what all you have included in there for us to consider.
Thanks, Jeff. Kotch, I want to talk to you about how this new and really provocative design framework for watershed architecture is being received by your architecture and landscape architecture colleagues. It's new thinking.
I think definitely the cross-disciplinary that we need to collaborate more, right? Even when we talk about river, there is like two levels, right? The level of professionalism that we need to, of course, when we think about dam, when we think about this house structure, we think only about engineer. When we think about trees, when we think about this like softscape, we think about landscape architecture. But if the world is changing and the challenging is beyond the way we used to think as the business as usual thinking, we need to merge. When we want to find innovation, we have to be more innovative and work together. And I think that in that level, the book kind of resonates the direction that the world should be. Normally, we really give the value to specialists, right? We specialize in one certain area. But yes, in a way, you have to do like vertical and horizontal connectivities with other profession, with other stakeholders, with other dimension as well. And in the dimension of all this human development on nature, right? Either it's a dam, either it's like all this development on the layer of earth, which is dynamic, which is not flat, which is changing all the time. And right now it's unexpected. We thought that we know nature as seasonal, as something expecting, that we can wait and we know exactly what it is. But nowadays it's actually unimagined from our knowledge. So I think when it's come to nature in the present days is something that we need to relearn. And also there's a talk a lot around nature, like nature-based solution, engineer with nature. Our profession try to claim nature. So we have to be very careful that are we try to understand it or we try to claim it to reclaim our area in professional. So we have to be very mindful where we are standing when we talk about multidisciplinary.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's an interesting way of looking at things, Kotch, and I appreciate that perspective very, very much. And as many folks know, I am a big fan of landscape architecture. I think that has really become a common denominator by which we're able to communicate very complex, difficult types of engineering solutions, particularly as we're describing nature-based solutions to the general public. And it's been something that has really resonated for me. And I think that certainly where I sit, I am really looking forward to reading Derek's book, Way Beyond Bigness, The Need for Watershed Architecture. I think that's a fascinating title. I think the content there is going to really help me to better understand and be able to deliver on my mission and to have engineering with nature be something that we can expand across the U.S. and beyond. So very much looking forward to adding to my knowledge of landscape architecture and these very interesting insights.
But as a landscape architect, I want to ask Derek, so what is way beyond bigness? So what it is?
It's a catchy title. It's a real catchy title.
I know. I was say the book is big, but yes, what is beyond all this bigness? As a landscape architect, what is your answer?
Well, the word bigness, and it's not a trademarked word, nor is watershed architecture yet, but that's a whole other conversation. 10 years before Hurricane Katrina, there was an essay written by a fairly well-known architect in the architect world, Rem Koolhaas, who's from the Netherlands. And he wrote an essay called Bigness, or the Problem of the Large. And in that essay, and I quote him in there, he challenges architects to engage a larger kind of multidisciplinary network. Collaborations, kind of almost surrender to engineers is one thing he says, which is provocative. But that's what we do as practitioners. We've done that for decades and centuries. But I'm kind of critical of it, honestly, where I was wondering when he said that term, was he just talking about designing bigger and bigger buildings, or ultimately like designing the city? And so that's where it says, let's go beyond that understanding of a designer thinking of larger things or larger projects, but really the larger issue of watersheds and water. The challenge is already so big, but we need to move beyond that. And maybe that might honestly mean talking about things like smallness, the actual reverse of what these large scale projects are. You have to dial in on a much more locally community based way of thinking about it. So it's a bit of a tease, like any title should be. But there's other aspects that the title is critical of itself.
So the next book would be way beyond smartness.
That'll be your book, Kotch.
I
No,
should
no,
trademark
that's
that.
yours.
But I think just to think about the bigness in the sense that, we conquer things with the size, or, the bigger, the better.
Right.
But in a way, beyond that kind of thinking is something that in this circumstance or in my learning is something like nature. It's dynamic, it's changing, it's shifting, and we should go beyond ourselves. We should go beyond the human development. We should go beyond something that we think is a great intervention, but the nature has the final word. This is
Right.
the sentence from the Muddy Mike. He's a friend of Derek who took me into the Mississippi. So he rowed his canoe, and I just sit and talk to him, and he just say, you know what? Whatever's gonna happen, the nature has its final word. So I just feel that we still under this big systems that we are part of it. Even how big we think we are, how big intervention we want to make, but still we have to be more respectful. Something that beyond our big ego, the bigness, right? So yeah, I think that's a very good way to put
I think that's great.
what's beyond bigness.
I think that's great. And I think it's a great segue into talking about what you did as you completed your residency, because my perception was that you were going to build something big. And
I know, I thought that too. I just thought I'm going to get the project. Where's the client?
I thought
Give me the...
there was going to be some magnificent edifice in St. Louis.
Me too, yes.
And when we spoke over the summer, and I shared a little bit when we did our little teaser in season 6, episode 5, you didn't tell me anything specific. But as we were preparing for this episode, I learned that you took a different approach. So enough suspense. Tell us what you did and why you did what you did.
Well, of course, I'm expecting something to be built in St. Louis. I think I'm overachieving. I just feel like looking back is a little bit like aggressive kind of thinking, right? Like, who are you to build something? Like, but of course, that's kind of like the habitual pattern for all the built environment.
Right.
We want to change things. We want to show our power of the tools that we have. So I set up many workshops, right? And also teach with Derek, with students at WashU. I did a teen workshop with a teenager around neighborhoods in St. Louis who probably have some idea about climate change, but not really know exactly what can they do for change. I also went to the middle school children to really understand what is the new generation thinking about these problems, and even go talk with US Corps engineer to really know exactly what they are doing in these river systems. So from all those perspectives, it just like blew me away that we really focus in our silo of thinking. And many times we forget about intergenerational relationship, that we need to groom younger generation, like students, next generation of designer, like middle school kids and things who like so scared of the change, and some of them are hopeless about what can they do, right? So I just feel that there's very many layers of the problems, that to really fix the problem is actually to really understand, because this is a problem from humans. And if we stop understand human ourselves, right, we only gonna go fix and reclaim nature more and more and call it adaptation. are you adapting nature again, or are you adapting yourself? So I just feel that this is a critical learning, which is very subtle, and I'm very humble to go through each of people, each of different roles in St. Louis, in the cities, in this landscape.
And learning from all these different people about what they were thinking about climate change and what could be done. That was the focus of your conversations?
In a way, yes. And I'm talked to Mayor. His town is actually next to the Mississippi River and flooded. And the people is moving out. His town only have like 69 households. It's crazy. Like people are leaving because they don't want to deal with flooding.
With the flooding.
And I just feel like it's probably the same, not exactly, but same community that I work with in Thailand, who's through the sea level rise have to move their home 7 times. But they still insist to stay. So they move their house in, like people move a lot, but this is like rebuild your house in the same place 7 times.
Wow.
Right.
So I just feel that it's like the gut of being a human and don't want to leave the home is actually what we're trying to do. We're trying to, protect flooding so we can all stay, no matter where you are. So I just feel that, and as a landscape architects, engineer, architects, urban planning, urban designer, we all have that thinking that we have to put the value in our habitat and human habitat only, right? And I just feel that how long can we continue on this thinking? Yes.
Yeah.
And this time,
Great point.
when we change things and when we adapting, we use nature, engineer with nature, nature-based solution. And if we mess up again to this direction, what is the next term we're gonna use? What will be the next term? So I think this is my learning. It's better than get things built. Maybe I can just build one project, right? But this is beyond not beyond bigness, beyond the bigness of myself that I think I could be. Just really like questioning things, and by comparison to experience, right? The book, The Way Beyond Bigness, will compare you to like 3 watersheds. But this, I compare Mississippi to Chao Phraya River, and through experience, I'm learned, and I'm sure people who I'm talk with, learn from me as well, and people in Thailand also learn about St. Louis and Mississippi through my experience as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kotch, I think that's an interesting point. And in many ways, you've become an ambassador. So you're taking what you've learned in Thailand and bringing it over here to share with American communities and American leadership and decision makers. And then you're taking what you've learned here back to Thailand and sharing what you've learned and being able to communicate about a variety of different things that you picked up while in residence. So that's fantastic to hear.
Thank you, Chef. I hope I'm a good ambassador.
I have no doubt at all.
I don't get people to fight.
You're a champion for nature, and we need all the ambassadors in that space that we can find. So you keep doing what you do.
I love ambassador for nature. Yes.
There you go.
That's what we all need to do.
I like that term.
Yes.
It sounds like a very personal and transformational journey that you experienced over the past year. I mean, it's really changed your thinking about yourself as an architect.
Yes, and also questioning many ongoing things that in the term of nature. Yes.
Oh, that's fabulous. Derek, how did Kotch's focus on this process of learning to align with nature, how did it change your thinking about her residency and your experience with her?
Oh, I mean, all great projects, change hopefully. And I think that's what happened pretty quickly with Kotch coming. And Jeff, kind of stole the words out of my mouth saying that Kotch is an ambassador. I think she is being very humble with what she's been doing. And I mean, she's all over the world. If you follow Kotch's Instagram feed, you'll get a pretty amazing clue into that. And in a really important way, she's kind of been the representative of like the landscape architecture discipline to places like in the United Nations and the COP conferences. And she's like in this really cool cartoon book called Rebel Girls that are going to change the world because she's going to save us from climate change, what have you. So in all seriousness, having someone come into a conversation that I've been, kind of making my way through and having successes and then hitting speed bumps. And I think it is, and I've said this before, it's really important to have that international perspective. And then bring that kind of lessons in and then bring them back to other places. Kristen Fleischman Brewer, who at the Pulitzer in charge of the community engagement, was pretty clear from the outset that this didn't need to be your typical tangible exhibition. Also with Matthew Bernstein here at our Sam Fox School Office of Socially Engaged Practice, who was instrumental in helping to coordinate this, we tapped into our network here to start to create these series of public programs. And so these programs would be actually the deliverable, and they would keep kind of building upon each other. And one of which was so special is that in my son's grade school, little did I know that he went to his teachers, Max is his name, so I'll give him a shout out, went to his teachers and put together this little PowerPoint presentation on Kotch and proposed it to the science and social studies teachers without me knowing. And then next thing you know, he comes back and he says, I'm going to have Kotch come and talk to my class about her work. And so that's kind of serendipity, right? Mm-hmm. That's where the magic happens. And that wouldn't have happened without Kotch being literally in the room of St. Louis to kind of enable excitement, and especially with the younger generation. So granted, I'm probably brainwashing my son a little bit with these issues and he's getting excited about it, but maybe he can like spread that out to his friends as they may move through things. So
fantastic.
Talk a little bit about some of these events that you had, and Kotch, talk about the series of videos that you've been doing. I know that there's one on your LinkedIn page that we'll put in our show notes, and it's great, but you're working on other videos or bigger videos. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, still learning, and Derek, Sam Fox, and Pulitzer brought me to many of these people, connection, communities, and my network in Thailand with the community as well. And I just feel that my experience is like juxtaposed, but it's something similar in that juxtaposition for where I'm from, Thailand, Bangkok, St. Louis, and Mississippi. So I've been interviewed this same position, engineer in U.S. Army Corps, engineer in government in Thailand, the mayor of the city in Mississippi River, the mayor from the city that confronting with the climate impact in Thailand. Mm. And through their real experience, you will find many similarity that we are actually in the same boat, right? The only thing that we can think that the whole world is in the same boat is during the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. Like either which country you're from the richest country or the poorest country, we are confronting the same thing, right? We don't have We don't know how to get food. The vaccine is waiting. It's the right one. We don't know what can be our life. And I want to feel that those is like the same experience as climate change, that we're actually on the same boat. It's not about which country. It's so transboundary of this impact. And this is like one of the panel discussion that we have with Derek and Matt and many stakeholders in St. Louis. It's called transboundary commonality. It's so common that you're surprised that these people have nothing to do with each other. They are from different part of the world, but they're talking the same thing. They're talking about the bureaucrat systems that slow things down. They're talking about a same issue of water, that we coming from different water, we're coming from the different rivers, but we use similar things to fix the problems, and it's a short term solution that we thought is gonna survive us all throughout our life. But no, we are confronting that all the things that we expecting, the biggest, the greatest, the hardest, but it's actually collapse. So those conversation is somewhat I want to share with what I heard from the people from these two sides of the world, and the audience can find their own answer.
Well, fantastic.
Where we are. Yeah.
Interesting, Kotch. Well, there's a lot, it sounds like, contained in these videos. And I certainly look forward to being able to look at the videos and be sure that we make those available to our listeners too. And so we'll make sure that we touch base with you and that we include those links or content as part of our show notes.
Yes, I do my best.
Jeff, do you want to give her a deadline?
Deadline.
Oh, goodness.
Engineer love deadlines.
Well, we'll talk about that, Kotch. How about it? I don't want to put any pressure on you. I know you're extremely busy.
No, that's great.
Before we let you go, I want to ask you one more question. I want to know, what was the one big takeaway that each of you had from working with each other over the last year? And Derek, I'll start with you. What was the one aha for you?
Oh, Kotch.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That says it all.
Lady first.
He walks in the room. Kotch. Okay, she saved me. I can go hide in the corner and she can take over. No, I don't know if that one word, obviously a new way of learning. Is that with hyphens? I don't know if that's one word.
No, not one word.
But,
the one big takeaway.
Well, I want to back it up a little bit, from when I first met Kotch and then before during the residency, she also taught with me, in our program here in the landscape program and urban design program. And one of the big things was we brought our students, and I went with as myself, as did Matt Bernstein and Jonathan Sittleman, to both the Mississippi and the Chao Phraya. We went to Bangkok. And so that was my main reason of going over there, was to be able to experience and also hear from the communities that Kotch was working with. So that taking myself out of the context of St. Louis and the Mississippi and going over there and then coming back here. And then that's when Kotch started to work with my network. So the other aspect of that was me being able to go reconnect with the people I've spoken with and worked with many years, but doing it in a new conversational context with Kotch being there, made me reflect and think differently about how I could move forward working with these great group of people in St. Louis and beyond. Great.
And Kotch, what about you? What was the one big takeaway, would you say, from working with Derek and his colleagues?
Well, I have to, if it's a one word, I would say it's a gratitude that I'm learning. It's a big word for me, like gratitude to to all this experience. And it seems like it's spontaneous, but I'm sure the Sanford School, Derek, Matt, Kristen from Hollister has worked so hard or helped me so much to experience or to learn and relearn. And I think a lot when I met with all these people, I love one quote from Jose Marti. He say, "In a time of crisis, the peoples of the world must rush to get to know each other." Mm-hmm. I just feel that this is the time that we get to learn from each other, to know each other. What is your solution? What is my solution? What's your problem? What can we do better? And through this whole year experience, this quote, it actually resonates so much that it's a crisis, and we need to rush to get to know each other, to listen to each other. And thank you so much, Derek. Thank you for this great year. And thank you for all your team, Matt. Oh my gosh. Wow. Whole community.
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
This has been so inspiring, and I appreciate you sharing that quote with us, Kotch. And I think that is so very true, that to be able to address these issues that we have concerning climate change, it really is going to take us getting to know one another to understand and appreciate our uniqueness as individuals, but how do we harmonize us as humans to really pursue and deliver good strategies and good solutions that will help us get past these real existential threats. And so with what you both are doing, Derek and Kotch, this is incredibly inspiring for future landscape architects and others. You're opening our eyes to the possibilities ahead, and certainly how you're looking at nature-based solutions at a system scale. It's really demonstrating value and how you're able to capture information from communities and practitioners and really listening to those that can help us solve these problems. So as Derek calls it, it's designing a solution. And it's really important that we do that.
That's a great place to wrap up our show. Thank you so much, Kotch and Derek, for coming back. I believe you're the only guests that we've had that invited yourselves back, so we're glad that we could make that happen.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
Yep.
It's been really intriguing to hear about your journey and some of the learnings and the incredible year that you two have shared. And I can only just imagine the number of people's lives that you've touched in all of the outreach that you've done, the communication, both in Thailand and the St. Louis area and beyond. So your work is so inspiring. And I'd have to say, I think your work is even more inspiring with the two of you doing it together. So we wish you both continued success as you redefine the future for architecture in complex, dynamic environments that are faced with climate change. We sure hope that you'll stay in touch, and maybe we'll invite you to come back on the show sometime.
Yeah, we're looking forward for the third
installment.
Jeff, Sarah, yes.
The trilogy. Yeah.
It is so great to see you both again, to have this conversation. It gets me very excited about the possibilities in the future. And I wish you all the best as you continue to pursue these endeavors. And yes, please keep us posted on all the great work that you're doing.
Absolutely. And to all of you, thank you so much for listening. We hope that you've enjoyed this podcast, and we hope you'll join us again as we talk about engineering with nature.
You've been listening to the EWN podcast, developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now, for more information, you can visit our website, engineeringwithnature.org. The EWN podcast is produced by iContact Productions for the Engineering with Nature program within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm Dave Trafford.